Up. So, for those people who weren't at the talk earlier, I was approached last year by a Dutch IT consultant who said, "We really want to help you get this material, and I have access to a lot of stuff, but I don't know which stuff is going to have political impact, and which stuff journalists are interested in. Do you have a list?" And no, we didn't have a list, and we thought we would try and make a list. And so I asked around and got our other people to ask around, human rights lawyers in the third world, journalists in Europe and United States, and a whole lot of activists internet activists who nominated material, a lot of censorship-related material. And we put together a list of material that these people want, and have gone through it and tried to organize it. So that list is a great starting point for anyone who doesn't know what to look at or where to look for it. An example that is on that list that, okay, can't see here, for the United States, these big document repositories, like the CRS reports, which is about $1 billion worth of reports that we release for CRS. So in distributing that to the world, if you like, we have released $1 billion worth of public intelligence to the world that has then gone on to be used everywhere. Funnily enough, even the State Department doesn't have access to the stuff by Congress. So all the time we see links and referrals coming in from the State Department, from embassies around the world in the United States. So another example like that CRS list, good material, is the CIA runs an open source, what it calls open source, which is very different to what you guys mean. But by the intelligence agencies, when they say open source, what they mean is we didn't steal it. When you guys say open source, you mean you can steal it. So anyway, so they comb Facebook, the internet, all the foreign broadcasts they have people listening to and noting them down. Those are all open sources because they're public. But they can be very obscure. And CIA analysts are then paid to analyze these open sources and pull together information. And that can be quite sophisticated, that work, and a lot of money goes into it. So the CIA Open Source Center produces these reports, but it doesn't have to worry about protecting its sources, because its sources are in fact the open media somewhere or something on the internet. But the reports can be first rate. And that database has millions of documents in it, from transcripts of overseas, but also these complex analysis of power structures in North Korea, in Iran, any big issue that intelligence managers in the United States want to know about. To get access to that database is not so hard, although how many documents you're transferring per second and things like this is fairly closely watched. So all you have to do to get access to it is to have a .gov email address or a .mil email address. And you write in and ask. You need to give a consistent IP. To use a consistent IP, if you're using Tor, you'll have to use a US exit server or something that is fairly consistent. And so we have received a number of documents from that. Also, Stephen Aftergood from the Federation of American Scientists has had a number of documents from that. But really, what should happen is we should get all documents from that. And all the documents from CIA open source database would be a great bit of information for many people in the world, many people that can't afford, many smaller governments that can't afford to have their own CIA producing reports. So perfectly doable. Another example is the PACER database. So this is actually a these are public US court records. All the time, big corporations have been sued in the United States under things like the False Claims Act, the Quitam Act, where lawyers get a percentage of the profits of any fines against these corporations. And they're suing each other. but the records are behind a pay system. But the records themselves are completely public. Now, earlier this year, someone squirreled out 10% of the PACER database. The guy who invented RSS, actually. He likes to call that part of the movement which we have in common is guerrilla open source. So opening up these public records, which should be public but for some reason constrained. That has millions and millions of records, and if that was Googleable, all the many activists and lawyers and journalists would be able to discover things in these filings that hasn't previously been revealed. Anyway, big list there for the United States. A lot of important documents. I give these examples as something that we know is achievable. These two previous examples, something we know is achievable, and it's a sizable volume of stuff. You're not just going after one document. So perhaps a question, or do you want to say something? Okay, so question.
Just a comment on the PACER database. I had well, anybody can sign up for an account, but you're right, it does cost money to download those files. With the bankruptcy court filings, they used to have social security numbers of people in those bankruptcy filings, and I pulled down a bunch of it. I don't know if it's censored at this point, but that was all public record.
Yep. I'm not sure what the question was. Comment, okay. Another comment or question?
Yes, I apologize if this was answered in the first lecture. I wasn't here. You talk about a lot about legal protection and how you deal with threats from big governments and big money. How do you deal with physical threats, and were there actually any physical threats or actions against your team, or anything associated with Wikileaks?
Yeah. So a lot of people watch too many American movies. And actually, I have never felt in a position where I'm physically threatened, except in some third world countries in Africa, where 6 armed men broke into my compound at 3 a.m. in the morning to do something. And some colleagues have also suffered. Some were killed, some had to flee a country, but that has to do with they were very public people. They were involved in very tense political situation. The writing was very clear to everyone. Some people didn't. A couple of people didn't read that writing and unfortunately were killed. But in European countries, in Western countries, that's not an issue at all. The worst that has happened to us is that we've been followed occasionally. I mean, big deal. I wish every journalist wants to spend a few days in jail, but no more. That's just something you put on the CV or something to tell the grandchildren. And working out how far you can push things to a few days, or so you have to leave the country for a little while and come back, is sort of a intelligence that people develop over time. But if you're anonymous, that's not an issue. If you're in the West and you have someone behind you, especially if you have an organization behind you, a group that's willing to defend you, press that is willing to defend you, that's a non-issue. As long as you, well, maybe an example, here's what not to do. So we had a guy, son of a Tennessee Democrat, who hacked Sarah Palin's account using a password reset. Actually, a lot of people criticized this guy for, this was a trivial hack, anyone could do it. But actually, only he did do it. So he had enough political sense